I don't think Stephon Gilmore is the best player on your team anymore. I think it's, as far as Dante Hightower is concerned, I thought about Dante Hightower. I briefly thought, I was like, do I want to have Dante Hightower on my list? And I said, the Patriots are so weak at linebacker. They were so weak at linebacker last year. And they have Hightower, and, he's getting a little bit older. I don't know how effective he's going to be. And I think that's why maybe I was hesitant to put him. But I thought about it because I said, you know what? They really need help at linebacker. They need someone to be the leader of that defense. And that's why my number one is Matthew Judon, who, as you may have noticed, I was hesitant to talk about before when you said him as number 4, because I wanted to have this moment with Matthew Judon. He is the most important player on the Patriots. Not only that, Matthew Judon, as you mentioned before, and you stole my thunder, he's the best player on the Patriots. Matthew Judon right now is probably the best player on the Patriots. I mean, all the reports we heard out of camp, all the reports all things we've seen of him, he looks like a monster. Like, he really looks incredible. And I liken this to the Stephon Gilmore signing a few years ago, which when the Patriots went out and signed Stephon Gilmore, they paid big money for Gilmore. And you thought the Patriots don't spend like that. And they paid it for a guy who was on arrival, who Gilmore was good. He was really good. Top 10 corner in the league. But he wasn't the best corner in the league. Wasn't the second best corner in the league until they brought him in. I think Matthew Judon could be the same story. That they go out, they sign Matthew Judon. He's a guy that you look at, pretty good pass rusher. Wouldn't put him near the top of the league probably. Pretty good linebacker. Wouldn't put him near the top of the league. But when he comes to New England and they target him, Bill Belichick says, I have all this money to spend, and that's my first target is Matt Judon. That's a statement. You're telling the NFL something. You're telling the NFL that as Bill Belichick, of all the guys, and we all know Bill Belichick in terms of his scouting and how he does it, he's better at scouting NFL players than he is college players. When he brings in Wes Welker, when he brings in Stephon Gilmore, when he brings in someone like that, you better watch out. So the fact that he went out there and said, I don't care what it costs, I'm bringing in Matthew Judon onto my team, and what he's said so far, what he's done so far, everything like that, it just tells me that Matt Judon should be incredible in New England. And you mentioned they've had some slip-ups in the past. That can't happen again this time around with Judon.
I don't think it will.
You compared it to Thomas. I just think his attitude is so much different than Adalius Thomas.
No, I wasn't comparing him to Adalius Thomas. I was just saying we can't have something like that happen again.
Right. And by the way, as players, not too dissimilar. Like the specimens
right.
they are. But the mindset to me is like flipped. And so the fact that they did everything they did to bring in Judon, to me, like it's I just think I look at him and I say this is the guy that could, as much as, and again we're not including Mac Jones. So besides Mac Jones, if Mac Jones is the savior of your offense, this guy could be the savior of your defense.
Right. Let me ask you something. When the Judon thing went down, did you expect it at all? Because I felt like, oh my God, overwhelmed just with shock. Like the tight ends people had talked about, could they go after this guy, whatever. I had no clue that one was coming. When I first heard the rumblings, and then it was like 20 minutes later, it was official. I literally couldn't believe it.
So I didn't expect it, and I wasn't all too that excited about it. I thought, Matt Judon, I paid big money for him. Okay, let's see what he does. But as training camp went along and as preseason went along, I said, this is why. This is why they brought in Matt Judon. And then it all started to make sense. My brain started turning, and it all started to fall into place that to compare it to the Gilmore signing and that where their place in the league is and wanting to elevate him and wanting to pay a guy that top of the market contract. And by the way, there's a lot of pass rushers that they didn't pay, they didn't want to pay Chandler Jones' contract.
Right, because I think Judon brings a little bit more to the table.
Right, and by the way, when Chandler Jones left New England, he was great for the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals got to be so happy they got.
Yeah, he was top 2 in the league in sacks multiple times.
Exactly, and the Patriots said, no, we wouldn't give that money to Chandler Jones, but we'll give that money to Matt Judon. When I start to think about what Matt Judon can do here, it's exciting. It is so exciting. And so you mentioned earlier, you said it. I don't think Stephon Gilmore is the best player on your team anymore. I think it's Matthew Judon. And they need him, quite frankly, to be a dominant defensive player if they're going to have a dominant defense. Because when you look across their defense, I think the defensive line is strong. I think their linebacker group is strong. I think their safeties are strong. Corners, if they get Gilmore back, definitely a strength. But when you talk about elite players in the NFL, elite defensive players, all the ones they have are kind of long in the tooth, and you got to be worried about whether it's McCourty, whether it's Hightower, whether it's even Lawrence Guy, if you want to throw him on the list, Gilmore. All those guys are getting pretty old. So J.C. Jackson's the only youngish one you have that you'd say, he was in the NFL top 50, so he's young and he was highly regarded by his peers. So you give him credit there. But do you have like a guy that can be insanely good? And I hope that's Matthew Judon. And I think a lot of signs point to the fact that it's going to be.
Yeah, you did surprise me. I think, but it was because I think you tried to play it off a little bit when I mentioned him as my number 4.
Right, and that's how I was too. Usually, if you mention someone or I mention someone that we have on our list, we say, "Oh yeah, that guy was number this from."
Yeah, no, I respect it though. He was your 1-1.
He was my 1. You gotta let me have my moment. My number 1. I mean, well, yeah, he was.
If I knew,
1. Okay, let me go down to 2. Like, no, I gotta have my moment of who the most important player on the Patriots is.
No, I think you still got your moment. I think the people.
Yeah, I did.